Hey guys, so in today's video we're going to be talking about the book. It is the third in the Bridgerton series and it's Benedict's story. The book is called An Offer from a Gentleman, and it's very, how should I say? It's very much Cinderella-ish. So the main female character in the story, her name is Sophie. And she is, she's like I don't want to like say certain words, like how they say it in the book. But she's like the illegitimate child of an earl. Right? So she was a product of the earl and I guess like a housemaid. When Sophie's mother was giving birth, she passed away. So the earl had sent the child to the grandmother on the mother's side. Well, then the grandmother became ill and she had sent Sophie back to the earl. So Sophie shows up back at the earl's, you know, like mansion or whatever, as a child. And the earl doesn't want to like admit that it's his child, even though everybody knows it is. So he says, he makes like a cover story that she is like a distant cousin's child, and like she is his, like he's like kind of adopting her. And so she grows up like that till she's about, I don't know, I forget. Till she's maybe like 9 or something, you know, like adolescent, but not like a baby. Like she's old enough to like really know what's going on, a little bit of the situation, but she's not, you know, she's still in her adolescence. So, you know, she grows up just like any other like debutante, kind of, you know, soft bred is how they kind of put it in the books. Like kind of she grows up like that. So she has like a governor or governess, and she like does lessons, and you know, she has the quality of life of somebody befitting higher class, right? So when she is about 9 or so, the earl remarries, and he remarries a lady who already has 2 kids. So we're really setting up the Cinderella story, you know? So she becomes the evil stepmother, and then the girls become the evil stepsisters. However, the one like or stepsister, she kind of is like pressured into being like that kind of, you know, she's pressured by her mom into like being mean to Sophie, and you know, but she's more kind-hearted, like just in nature, you know, like her nature is just to be a little bit more kind-hearted. And she is also the stepmother's like least favorite, you know, child. She has 2 children and she really favors the oldest child, and she dotes on the oldest child, and so Posey feels that so she sympathizes, I guess, with Sophie a little bit, you know, and she really doesn't want to be mean to her. So when Sophie's a teenager, the earl passes away, and there's like an ultimatum in the will, right, where it's like the stepmom only gets a certain amount of money to be on her own, but if she decides that she will take Sophie in, that amount of money is larger, right? So she's in essence getting paid to have Sophie there. So she agrees to have Sophie there, but she stops letting her do lessons and like all this kind of stuff, and she kind of makes her her slave, you know, like she treats her like a maid, a governess, but she doesn't pay her anything, and she's also making money off of her. So it comes out later on in the book that also she was left a dowry, and you know, really shows that like her father, you know, who's her, you know, adoptive guardian, whatever you want to call it, really wanted her to like, you know, be able to go into society and like do all these things, and the stepmother really like took that away from her. So one night there's a ball and we're going into the Cinderella story. So she is helping the girls like get ready for this ball, and it's at the Bridgerton house, and this is like the year after Anthony had gotten married. So the Bridgerton mom, Violet, she is still living in the house, and she plans to give the estate over to Anthony when they have their first child, right? So there's this ball at the Bridgerton house, and she's helping Posey and Rose. Her name's Rosamund. We're just gonna call her Rosa because, you know, I don't want to say that every single time because I feel like it's kind of a little bit of a tongue twister for me. So she's helping them get ready for the ball, and she makes like a comment about like, oh, I wish I could go to a ball, and of course the mother is like, ew, you could never go to a ball, you're nothing, blah blah blah. And she was just like, yeah, I know, like, I get it, like, you don't have to remind me constantly. So one of the maids like overhears this, and she like winks at Sophie, and Sophie's like, oh, that's like weird, like, what was that about? Well, I think we all know that the maid had it all set up for that night. She was gonna go to the ball, and she did. And this is where she meets Benedict. So Sophie is also like a avid whistle down reader, right? Okay, so she knows like about the Bridgertons and everything like that, and she's like read about the brothers, and she's always kind of like dreamed to be in the scenario that she's in. So it's like she's super excited, and she's just like beaming with like joy and like just in awe of everything. And you know, people at the ball like kind of pick up on this like as soon as she walks in, and they're like, oh my god, who's this person? It's a masquerade, by the way. I should have said that, right? So it's a masquerade. They don't know who this person is, and they're like, you know, like everybody kind of crowds her as she walks in, and all the guys are like wanting to do dances. And Benedict, I keep wanting to call him Benjamin. I'm sorry if I do that. I don't know why, it's like stuck in my head. So Benedict sees her, and he sees all these guys like kind of crowded around her, and he's like, I want to dance with her. So he just goes up and he like totally takes control of the situation. He's like, oh, the young lady has already promised me a dance, and you know, we're gonna dance. So she just accepts this, and she like goes with him, and she goes to the dance floor, and then he's like, let's do a waltz or something, and she's like, I don't know how to dance. And he's like, what do you mean you don't know how to dance? Like, what? And she's like, yeah, I have no idea how to dance. And he's like, well, then I must, you know, teach you. So he's going to teach her how to dance, and they're going to go to like a private terrace, right? Alone. And he's going to teach her how to dance, and she's like totally down with it. And he's like, okay, cool. So they like go off, and they kind of get stopped by Colin, right? Colin. And he's just like kind of like talking casually with his brother, not really paying too much attention to the fact that this girl is there. And so they just have like a conversation. She's able to notice that he is also a Bridgerton, and in her mind she's like, okay, well, he must be the youngest, you know, and then that means that Benedict is Benedict, you know what I mean? Like, she could tell like they were brothers, and you know, she had never met them in person, but she kind of like deduced, you know, from the situation that he must be Benedict, right? And Benedict has always struggled with people just categorizing him as, you know, the second Bridgerton, you know, and not really giving him an identity outside of that. So they go on this private terrace and, you know, they're talking, and you know, he's like, there's something different about this girl. And you know, she tells him like she's never been to like a ball or anything like that, and he's thinking like maybe she's just like not out yet. And they're talking, and like he asks if like she knows who he is, and she's like, yeah, you're, you know, Benedict. And he's like, yeah, I am. So anyways, they're talking. Benedict's feeling like, oh my god, like, who is this person? Like, I could like totally be with this person. And she's like, oh my god, this is like my dream come true, like a total like fairy tale. But she's still like very much like a realist. So she's like, well, it would like obviously never work out. Like, he doesn't know who I am. If he did know who I was, he wouldn't be treating me like this, you know. And so she's just kind of making the best of the night, but she is like not like, I say like too much. She's not like having her hopes up that like they're gonna run off and get married or anything. She's very like leveled in like reality of the situation she is in and the situation he is in, and how those two don't, you know, really work together. So they have a great night. He kisses her and she kisses him back. And then at midnight, because it's Cinderella's story, she has to leave at midnight. So midnight comes around, and also as part of the masquerade ball, you're supposed to take your mask off at midnight. So it gets to the point where she's like kind of just teasing him about like he doesn't know who she is and blah, blah, blah. And then midnight comes and he's like, okay, well, you have to take your mask off. And she's like, I gotta go. And she runs, right? Well, during that whole thing, you know, on the balcony, he had taken her glove off, right? You know, it's so weird in like this like historical like romance kind of thing. It's always something with like the gloves. Like, it is so sexy to take the gloves off. And I never really understood that, but hey, whatever. It was super sexy. Like, she took her glove off, and he still had this glove in his hand when she took off running. So on the glove there was like a family crest and like some initials. So she goes off running. He chases her, but he doesn't catch her, and he has this glove. So he's like, I'm gonna go talk to my mom, because she's going to know this family crest, right? And she'll be able to like tell me like who this would maybe possibly belong to, and then I could find her that way, because like he was set that he had to like find her and like, you know, I don't know, marry her or something. He just felt different with her, you know, and he wanted to explore that. Let's put it that way. So she's a lady in silver to him at this point, because he doesn't know her name. He doesn't know much of anything about her, only that she had the silver dress and the, you know, the glove. So Violet, I'm sorry, I'm sick. So if I'm like, if I sound really nasally or like keep clearing my throat, I'm really sorry. I know that can be annoying. So he takes his glove to Violet, his mother, and she looks at the family crest and she's like, this is the Earl of Penwood something. This is like the crest for the Earl of Penwood, but that title had gone out of the family because the Earl didn't have a son, so he didn't have an heir, so it like passed out of the family, right? So that wasn't their like crest anymore, and the person that it passed to was like very young and didn't have children, so it was kind of like a mystery of who this belonged to, and the initials didn't match anybody. so anywho, at this ball, Sophie had actually ran into the evil stepmother, right? And she had also borrowed her shoes for the event or whatever, and so that's important, and I forgot to say it. So anywho, so he goes to the, you know, his mom tells him about the girls that are like the stepdaughters of the Earl, like maybe that's a possibility, and he's like, okay. So he goes and he visits the stepmom to kind of like just poke around and see like what's going on, like maybe is it one of these girls, and he meets them and immediately he's like no, and the stepmother becomes suspicious of this because she's like, that was like really odd that he just came here, wanted to meet you guys, and then left, you know. And she had been at the ball and she had ran into this lady in silver. And so, and she had knew that they had been like, he had been chasing her or whatever. So she kind of like, realized that it was Sophie, right? So she kicked Sophie out. And in the middle of her kicking Sophie out, Sophie decides that, you know, this lady has done her so dirty that she's not like leaving empty-handed. So she goes and she takes, well, she's been made to like polish the shoes, and the stepmom won't let her leave until she's done. So while she's polishing the shoes, there's like this little shoe clip or something, and she's like, you know what, like I'm taking this because I'm not gonna be like on the street with nothing, nowhere to go, no nothing, and this lady, you know, owes me because I've been working for free for her, you know. So she takes this shoe clip, right? And she leaves. So that's like it for part 1. So part 2, it's separated by like 2 years. During this time, Sophie finds employment out in the country for like a nice little couple, an older couple. They do have a son who's away at like university, and so she's been working there. They treat her nice. During this time, Benedict really hasn't been like too much out in society because he's still hung up on this, you know, lady in silver, which is Sophie. And so anyways, it kind of picks up with Sophie at this new place of employment. And she really does like working for this older couple. The issue is, while she's worked there for like years, while their son is away at university, he has recently come back and he is very sexually like aggressive towards her, like trying to pursue her sexually and like cornering her, making her uncomfortable, and she's like just not down with it. Now most of the time the parents are there to she can kind of use them as a shield, but they have gone away on like a weekend or something, and the son has decided that he is going to throw a party, and now he's drunk and a bunch of his friends are drunk, and it's just not like a good situation for her. So she's very, very much scared of what will happen. So she decides that although she did love working for this family, it's just time for her to go. She doesn't want him making advances at her. She's scared. So she decides she's going to go. So in the middle of this party, she's packing her stuff, right? Now, it just so happens that Benedict is also at this party, and he is like, wow, this party sucks. Like, everybody's just drunk and being, you know, well, drunk, and and so he's like, I gotta get out of here. But as he's like trying to like leave, he's like, I really just need to find the host and just, you know, thank them for their party, you know, stick to like his manners and stuff like that. So he's looking for the guy who threw the party, right? It just so happens that he finds the guy out in the yard. And now Sophie was leaving the party with her bag of stuff, and she's just trying to get out of there. And the owner had like kind of caught her, like, where are you going? You're not going anywhere. And he was like holding her like against her will. And he also had two friends that were there, and they were messing with her as well. And they were kind of like throwing her back and forth, you know, making like sexual advances, groping her, and like all this kind of stuff. So Benedict kind of walks in and he sees all this, right? And he's like, oh no, like this isn't gonna do. And so, you know, he breaks that up and he kind of like rescues her, right? So she's very thankful. He's like, I can get you a job, you know, at my mom's house, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you know, okay. So she goes with him, and she obviously recognizes him right away, but he doesn't recognize her. So she's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. Like, you know, like what, you know, he's going to be so mad if he recognizes me, but like, I want to say something. She doesn't know what to do. So she just kind of stays quiet. And they start riding out to his cottage. And during the drive, it starts to rain, like really heavily. Now, at this time, Benedict had just been getting over like a really bad cold, so it kind of backtracked his progress that he had been making on this cold, and it ended up getting him sick again. So they get to the cottage, it's pouring down rain. As soon as they get there, like this cold that he was getting, you know, just getting over, starts to like relapse, and she is now like taking care of him. You know what I mean? He has a fever, you know, she's taking care of him. She kind of just jumps into like that role that she's like, you know, a maid, and she's going to, you know, he's like her new boss kind of, and he's very adamant about like, you don't work for me, you don't need to feel like you work for me. But she kind of feels that way anyways because of her own herself. She makes herself feel that way. He doesn't make her feel that way. She just feels that way. So we're going in there. So she's like taking care of him, and she's like kind of, you know, snooping while he's like sick with like a fever in bed and like having like hallucinations or, you know, some kind of delirium from the fever. She's like looking through his stuff, and, you know, Benedict is an artist, and while she was looking through his stuff, she ends up finding a drawing of her from the night that they had, right? And, you know, she's like kind of flattered about it, right? She still doesn't say anything though. But she's like, man, this is like, she really does think that it's a bad idea for her to go work for her mom, because she figures she figures it's only a matter of time before he realizes who she really is, right? So she kind of, over the next couple days, kind of nurses him back to health, and, you know, he starts feeling better. And during this time, they're kind of like creating like a bond between them. You know, he is, you know, attracted to her, and, you know, she's very adamant about like she doesn't want to go there, okay, because of the way that her mom was, you know, and like how she was raised and the repercussions of that. She's very against ever being somebody's like mistress. She doesn't want to have children out of wedlock, you know. And she was instilled from a very young age to kind of have those same morals as, like, you know, like people in society had, you know, in the, you know, in the upper levels of society, whatever it is. So she's like kind of really caught between like two worlds, you know? And she's not really willing to budge on like how she feels. So during this time, you know, he's like really lusting after her, and she's lusting after him, but she just won't let herself go there, you know? So they're at his cottage, and he decides that he's gonna like go swimming, right? So he like kind of sneaks out of the house and he goes swimming, and she just happens to be on like a walk, and she kind of walks up on the lake that he's swimming in. He's naked, but you know, he's like, you know, waist deep at least, you know. But she decides that she's gonna like peep and tom him, right? So she's like stand behind a tree or something, and she's peeking, you know. And he kind of has this like sense that like somebody's watching him. So he's like, hey, who's there? Blah, blah, blah. And then he realizes that it has to be Sophie. And so he like calls her out. And so she comes from behind the tree. And, you know, one thing leads to another. And he ends up kissing her after he gets out of the water. He gets out of the water, you know, gets dressed and stuff without her looking her back turned or whatever. And they end up kissing. And he then asks her to be his mistress, right? And at first she's like, ooh, baby. At first she's like thinking about it, but then like she thinks about it and she's like, no, I can't do that. You know what I mean? And he doesn't understand why or whatever. And she's like, I'm just gonna leave. And he's like, no, you're not. If you leave, I'm gonna like, it's kind of low. Okay, but he's like, if you leave, I'm gonna like call the cops and say you stole something. He thinks that he's like doing it for her own good. But like, I don't know. I don't know. Because, like, isn't there always a man trying to, like, do something that's for your own good, right? Like, no women want that. That is unwelcomed, sir. So, anyways, he threatens her with jail if she leaves. And so she decides, okay, whatever. I don't want to go to jail. So they end up leaving the cottage and going to the Bridgerton house. But, you know, she had been to the one house, but she had never been to this new house because the house had been transferred over to Anthony when he had children. And at this point, he had had children. It had been like 2 years or something, you know. So they had their children. And so the Bridgertons had moved to a different house, a new house, where the mother and the non-married siblings all lived, right? So, so they get there, and Violet obviously, you know, gives her job, and it just so happens that they had just lost their governess, right? Whatever it is. They had just lost her to this stepmother, the evil stepmother. I guess after Sophie had left, the evil stepmother started preying on, like, you know, housekeepers, you know, from around the town, and would offer them money, like more money to come work for her, and then she would just treat them terribly, and they'd end up running back or whatever. And so it just so happens that the Bridgerton governess had just left to go to the evil stepmother, right? So anywho, there was this opening for this position, and Violet gave it to Sophie. So pretty quickly, Violet starts to realize that there's something different about Sophie. Sophie kind of uses the cover story of, like, you know, her mother's, the people who hired her mother, like her mother was a housekeeper, the people who hired her mother were generous and let her take lessons, and that's why she is so prim and proper, and like that's how she knows how to talk, and like all these other things. And Violet, I mean, she gets away with it for the most part, but Violet's like, I don't know, like there's something going on here, because she realizes that Sophie like knows French, and like the pieces just are not adding up. So during this time, Benedict is still trying to get Sophie to be his mistress. They end up kissing like in the backyard, in the garden. And she's kind of acclimating to the Bridgerton family, and she really loves the family, and she's like very, like, she just feels like she's becoming part of the family. Now, Violet had, like, always offers her to come join for, like, tea and, like, you know, conversation and all this, so she really loves being part of that. It's like something she never had, she always wanted. So she really does feel super welcomed. And then one day she goes to, I don't know, like get away from Benedict or something, like so she like runs out the front of the house, and right there is like the stepmom, the sister, and the other sister, Posey. And Posey sees her, and she's like, don't say anything, you know, and Posey doesn't, like, they just leave. The stepmother doesn't see her, but she's really frightened and she's really shook up, so she just, like, freezes right there. Oh, you know what, she went out to go get, like, one of those thimbles, right, for sewing. So she left to go get thimbles, but really why she left is because Benedict came and she didn't want to see him. You know, she did want to see him, but she didn't. You know what I mean? Like, one of those things. Like, I'm worried about him. Where is he? But, like, also, like, don't come near me. Now that I just know you're safe and you're okay, just leave me alone, you know? So, one of those vibes. So, Benedict ends up finding her kind of, like, in this state of, like, PTSD or something, where she is just like frozen in fear because of what just happened, and he like kind of picks her up, and instead of just carrying her in the house, he like takes her to his house. And they end up doing it. Okay, so after they end up doing it, you know, she's very like remorseful because she's like scared that she's gonna get pregnant, and she really was really against that. So she was like kind of like, you know, feeling bad about that. Like, she really did like him, but she just wasn't ever going to be satisfied with being somebody's mistress. So after Benedict and Sophie hooked up, Benedict is really thinking that she's going to give in to being the mistress, and she doesn't. So they end up getting in this big fight about it, and Benedict decides that he doesn't want to go over to the Bridgerton house for like a minute, you know, and he just kind of wants to like think about everything, and he kind of comes to the conclusion that he wants to marry her, and he doesn't really care what society thinks. And you know, he kind of was holding out for this lady in gray, but he really rationalizes that, you know, this lady in gray isn't there, and Sophie is there, you know, like, so, like, why is he putting this person above her when, you know, she's there, she's present in his life? you know, and he could possibly never see this other person ever again. So he decides that he is going to marry Sophie. So he goes over to the Bridgerton house and he's having a talk with his mother, kind of just asking her, like, you know, if she would, you know, have his back in case he married outside of his rank. And Violet kind of knows who he's talking about, and she's kind of asking him questions, blah, blah, blah. And at the end of it, she's just like, you know, I love you. I support you in anything you do, but just know that, like, society is not going to support you, and that's always going to be, like, a fight. You know what I mean? Like, that's always going, they're never going to, you know, view your wife as part of society and blah, 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 blah. So during this same, like, talk that he's having with his mother, Sophie is upstairs and she's taking care of some of the little Bridgerton, you know, children, some of Daphne's kids, some of the cousins, you know, like the little children. So Benedict decides that he is going to tell Sophie that, you know, he wants to marry her, right? So he walks in, and this is when he kind of sees the scene of her with her blindfold on, playing the game with the children, right? And that's when he realizes that she is, in fact, the lady in gray. And so he is, like, mad about it, you know, like, he is, like, kind of pissed about it, like, why didn't she tell me? Like, he feels, like, betrayed, and he, like, confronts her. And he asks, like, you know, who she really is, you know, and, like, kind of questions her. And this is when she tells him who she really is. And then he leaves because he's, like, really upset. That, like, he feels like she lied to him. And so he leaves. And she really feels like she has to leave the situation as well. Like, she can't continue to be at the Bridgerton house. Like, it's just too much of a conflict of interest, and she just wants to get out of there. So she goes and she, like, kind of, like, packs her stuff, and she goes to Violet, and she, you know, lets her know that she's quitting and that she really enjoyed, you know, working there. And Violet's very much like, you don't have to leave if you don't want to. But Sophie really, you know, is firm on the fact that she is going to leave. So Violet's like, you should take one of our carriages, you know, and in Violet's mind, she's really wanting just to make sure that she knows where Sophie is going, you know, in case she needs that information for, like, Benedict or something, you know. So she agrees. Sophie agrees to take the carriage, and Violet goes to, you know, talk to the driver or whatever, and, you know, arrange this. So she's just sitting there, and she decides that she is just going to wait outside. She's just going to go outside and wait for the carriage out front. And when she walks out and sits on the steps, her stepmother sees her. And so Sophie starts to run, right, down the street, and the stepmother is, like, screaming, you know, that she's a thief and catch her and stop her. She's a thief, blah, 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 blah. And so somebody, like, tackles Sophie, and the police come and they arrest her. And this is all seen by Lady Whistledown. So nobody really knows in the Bridgerton family what happened, because nobody was, like, really there to see it. But it was reported in Lady Whistledown the next day. So when the Bridgertons got that, they figured out where Sophie had went, and they kind of came to her rescue, right? So Sophie is sitting in jail, And the stepmother comes and she's like just so proud of herself, you know, like, I got you arrested, blah, blah, blah. And not only was she saying that she had stole the shoe clip, that she had also stole the wedding ring, some kind of expensive ring, right? Her engagement ring, I don't know. And that she was most likely going to go to Australia. And, you know, she was just kind of reveling in, like, the fact that she, you know, had won or whatever. Who knows? So, this is all going down, and then all of a sudden Benedict is there, and so is Violet, and they kind of come in, and the warden comes in, and they're kind of all like hashing it out, and Benedict's like, this is my fiance, blah, 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 you know, like, get her out of the cell. And she's like, well, wait a minute, like, fiance, like, what are you talking about? And they're kind of like going back and forth, they're throwing, you know, insults or whatever, and then Posey shows up, and she rats her mom out for being a liar, and she says that she took the shoe clip and that Sophie didn't take it, and that the ring that was, you know, stolen was actually not stolen. It was at their house, and Posey would take them to go find it. And so when the stepmother heard all this, she's like, she kind of backed down a little bit. And then Posey reveals that Sophie actually had a dowry that was left that the mother had stolen from her. And they're all kind of like fighting back and forth. And it ends up with the charges being dropped against Sophie. And she's going home with, you know, Benedict and Violet. And then Posey, the stepmother, was like kind of like disowned her because she, you know, didn't back her up, you know. And the Bridgertons like took her in, you know what I mean? Like, they're like, Violet was like, you're a terrible mother, you know, and she could come live with us, you know. And so Posey was like, okay. And she went with Violet and the Bridgertons, right? Now also, as like all this is happening, Violet comes up with like this plan on how she is going to get, like how she's gonna kind of like make it okay for Benedict and Sophie to get married. So when they find out about this dowry, Violet Bridgerton starts threatening the stepmother, and she says, well, you know, give us a minute alone. And while they're alone, she says, if you don't like stick to this story, that she is the ward of the Earl, and, you know, she's like the uncle or the daughter of some uncle or something, then I will get my, you know, solicitors or like auditors, right, to come audit you to find that dowry. And if we cannot find it, you'll have to go to jail for theft, you know. And because the stepmother, like, didn't have it, she had already like squandered it, she really was left with no choice but to like agree to this plan that they had came up with. So they ended up getting married. And while like some people in like society really didn't believe like the whole story or whatever, you know, the evil stepmother really did stick to her story about, you know, obviously she doesn't want to go to jail. She doesn't want like these auditors or solicitors or lawyers or whatever they are like bothering her. So she really did stick with the story if people asked, but people didn't necessarily believe that. So Sophie and Benedict kind of decided to live like a more quiet life, like out in the country, not really like in society, but they ended up, you know, having kids and living happily ever after. And that is it. So in the book, there is like a little story about Posey and what happens with her. What is it called? The prologue. So in the prologue, which was mainly about Posey, she ends up staying with the Bridgertons, right? And they really adopt her as like one of their own. But unfortunately, you know, a bit of time goes by. And she, like, you know, is kind of at the age where people are starting to like refer to her as like a spinster and stuff like that, because she hasn't, you know, been successful in the marriage mart. However, the Bridgertons put a lot of that on the stepmother, because she treated her so bad and didn't really give her like a fair shot, because she was always, you know, trying to push her oldest daughter on people, and like, you know, Posey was really on the back burner for everything, you know. And Posey didn't get, you know, the nice clothes. She didn't get the, like, she didn't really get to show, you know, who she was, because she was always being swept under the rug by her mom. But still, she's at the age where, you know, people are considering her to be like a spinster, until Sophie in their town, there's like a new vicar, right? Is that what it's called? I think it's like a priest or something, right? Maybe. So, like, this new priest comes to town, and he's like very like smiley and like, you know, but he's like, he's not married, he doesn't have children. And so Sophie kind of arranges it for Posey and this guy to like kind of meet, and they instantly like have like a connection, and they end up getting married and like having children. I thought it was like a cute ending for Posey, you know, because she had to go through like a lot of trauma as far as like, you know, being raised by her mother and like all that kind of stuff. It was like traumatic for her, even though she did participate in like kind of making things hard on Sophie. She never really wanted to participate in that. She really felt pressured to, and she was like, ultimately at the end of the day, like, came to Sophie's like rescue and stood up for her mom and everything. So Sophie did like feel like, you know, everything was forgiven with, you know, Posey, and like, you know, really tried to help her heal from like her trauma and like all that kind of stuff. So that was the end of the book. Yep, I hope you liked it. Okay, I will see you guys later. Bye.